Hello, it's Sonia here with The Pretty Stitch. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time joining me, I'm so happy to have you here. So today is Wednesday and it's another Stitch of the Week. So for today's stitch, I am going to be using an H hook or a 5mm hook. And I have some worsted weight or number 4 yarn. Now you certainly can use a variety of yarns and hook sizes with this little swatch that we're doing. And we're going to be working in Tunisian crochet. So if you've never done Tunisian before, or if you've never done Tunisian, then I highly recommend you look at my little Tunisian series you can learn the basic stitches. But if you have done Tunisian and you don't have a Tunisian hook, you don't need to use one. Just use a straight hook like this. You might even be able to, this is a tiny swatch, use a hook with a thicker, some of those hooks that have the thicker handles, you might even be able to get away with that. So for this stitch, this is going to be a Tunisian mesh stitch. We are going to need to chain an even number. So I am going to chain 10. Alright, so I have 10 chains here. So we are going to work our first row, which is going to be basic Tunisian. We're just pulling up loops, and then this loop on your hook is going to count as a stitch. So you're just going to turn it over, second chain from your hook. We're working in the back bump and we're going to pull up loops. So I just find it easier to work in the back bump with Tunisian. I mean, you can certainly work in the chain, the other way, but it's just, I find it to be much easier. And it looks a little bit neater when you work in the back bump. So whatever you chained, I have 10 chains is how many loops are going to be on your hook. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I have 10. Alright, so we've got 10 chains. We are ready to go. And our first row, which we popped these guys on, we're going to work these off in regular Tunisian. So you yarn over, pull through 1, and yarn over, pull through 2 for the rest of the row. And that's pretty standard for a lot of Tunisian projects. You're going to have your setup row, and then you'll actually start with the stitch pattern. Alright, so we have our setup row, row 1 here. So working row 2, we are going to work in the next bar. Right here, or the stitch. Usually a lot of times Tunisian they call it a bar, because it kind of looks like a bar. And we're going to pull up this bar right here in regular Tunisian simple stitch. So we have 2 loops on our hook. Now we're going to yarn over. Just like if we were working like a double crochet, we're just going to work a yarn over. We are going to skip the next bar here. So right here, as you can see, we're going to skip that guy and just work Tunisian simple in the next. Yarn over again. Skip the next, work Tunisian simple in the next. Yarn over again, skip the next. So now we have 2 remaining stitches. We have this bar here and then our last stitch here. So we're going to yarn over again, skip this guy, and then in the last one I always like to work a Tunisian knit stitch because to me it just creates a neater edge and it looks similar to your beginning edge here. Not an exact copy, but it's pretty close. So it looks kind of like a little chain there. So you just pop your hook all the way in there and pull up a loop to work the Tunisian knit. So you should have 10 loops on your hook. So we'll just make sure so we have 10 loops. So now we're just going to work these off in regular Tunisian return pass. So yarn over. I didn't say that for this. This is always called the return pass. So you're going to pull through that first loop. You usually pull through just 1 at the end of a row. Sometimes you'll pull through 2, and if you do, the pattern will tell you, but if they don't tell you, then it's usually you just pull through the 1 loop. So we're going to yarn over, pull through 2, and then continue to pull through 2 for the rest of the row. And sometimes when you work a return pass, you actually do create some stitches but most times you just work a normal return pass. Whoops. So I almost pulled through too many stitches. Okay, so we have worked our first mesh row here, so you can see the holes. So now we're going to work row 3, and it's real easy to count your rows because you can turn it on its side, and 1, 2. So now we're ready for row 3. So for row 3, you're going to yarn over. We're going to skip this bar right here, and we're going to pull up a loop in this one. So this is our yarn over. So you can kind of see, let's look at the anatomy of a yarn over. I think it helps when learning new things and learning stitches if you can really see how the stitch is made up of, like how it's made up. That makes sense, made up of. How it's made up, it can help you, especially in future projects with yarn overs or learning any stitch. If you know the components of it, it can help you with your stitching so that you feel a lot more comfortable with what you're doing. So here we have, right here is a regular Tunisian simple stitch. But we did yarn over, so the yarn over sometimes can get a little bit lost in the work, especially, I mean, this one's not too bad, but some of them, they like to kind of hide, but it's there. So it's important to know how many stitches that you should have across. So we should always have 10. So in case you miss a yarn over, you can go back and you can go find it. So you can see the yarn over. It looks similar to this bar, but it's not quite like that. It's a little bit kind of slanted like that. So it could kind of get lost in the stitch and you would think it's not a stitch, but it actually is. So you will want to work in here. So let's go back and work row 3. So I just wanted to pause and just kind of explain the stitches a little bit. And if I'm pulling it like this, see the yarn over kind of starts to disappear, but she's there. So you just want to be mindful of that. And in some projects, what I've even done, if there's a whole bunch of yarn overs, and maybe if you're using finer yarn, you can actually stick a stitch marker or wrap a piece of yarn around there or a bobby pin to kind of let you know, that's a stitch, don't forget it. So just a little tip there. Okay, so let's go back to row 3. So we're going to yarn over, and we're going to skip this bar right here, and we're going to go work in our previous yarn over. So you're just working a Tunisian simple, just pulling that guy right up. So we're going to yarn over again, skip this next bar here, and work in the next stitch, which was a yarn over, and pulling that loop up. And we're going to continue and do the same thing across, skip the next one, and working in this stitch, which was a yarn over. And we're yarning over, skipping that one, and we're going to work in the second to the last yarn over here. Pull up a loop, and now we're going to work our knit stitch in our last stitch here. And now we have completed, or almost completed, row 3. This is the forward pass. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you want to make sure that you didn't skip a stitch, you could do a quick count of your loops on your hook. And we started with 10, and we have 10 on here, so we're doing good. So you're just going to work the normal return pass, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. So this is not a hard stitch pattern at all for Tunisian, but you just, want to know what what the stitches are supposed to look like. So there you go. We can see that we've created more of a mesh there. All right, so now we've worked row 3 rows. Now we're going to work row 4 of our stitch pattern, our mesh stitch pattern. So what you're going to want to do is you are going to see, here's our yarn over right here, this bar. So we're going to work on this guy. And just work in Tunisian simple, pull up a loop. So now you're going to yarn over, we're going to skip the next stitch and work in this next one. And we're going to do that all the way across, yarn over, skip one, work in Tunisian simple in the next, skip that one, work Tunisian simple in the next stitch. So now we have 2 stitches left. We're going to yarn over, and we're going to skip this guy, and we're going to work in the last stitch and pull up a loop. So we should have 10. Yep, we got 10, we're good to go. So we'll work our return pass. So this would be a really nice stitch pattern to get practice with yarn overs, where they are, what they look like, so that you could do a little bit more of an intricate, there's some very intricate Tunisian patterns out there, but as I said, yarn overs can be a little bit tricky, so this would be a good little swatch to do to kind of get your feet wet with yarn overs and just to know where they are. Alright, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to repeat rows 3 and 4 for the remainder of this stitch pattern. So if we go back to row 3, so for row 3 we do a yarn over. So when you're doing row 3 you start with a yarn over. Row 4 you don't start with a yarn over, if that helps you out. So we yarn over, skip this guy here, work in this one. Yarn over, skip the next bar, work in the next. And sometimes the yarn overs from the previous row show up really easily, like this one, like they're really front and center, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they, especially in finer yarns, they really can just kind of get sucked into your project and then you're like, where is the stitch? Alright, skipping this guy, so we're going to work in this one here and then work our knit stitch in the end. So this is row 3. So rows 1 and 2 were our setup, and then you will repeat rows 3 and 4 for the remainder of your mesh stitch pattern. So we'll do a quick repeat of row 4. So row 4, you're going to, as I said, you did a yarn over for row 3. Row 4, you're going to jump right in and work right in that first stitch in Tunisian Simple. Now you do your yarn over, skip the next stitch, and just continue to repeat, skipping the next, working your yarn over. So the yarn overs are actually an increase, so you're increasing and kind of decreasing at the same time because you're skipping a stitch. And then we're going to yarn over for our final. And we'll just work these guys off. So I will work a few more rows, and again you want to repeat rows 3 and 4 for however long you want your swatch, and then we can work some stitches off as a little refresher on how to work off Tunisian stitches. So I'll work a few more rows and then we'll work these guys off, so I will meet you back. Okay, so I worked my little swatch here. I've actually worked 10 rows. So I think if you made this in like a cotton yarn, I mean, it would block out really nice. Cotton blocks out real well. This is acrylic, so to really kind of get it to open up, you would probably need to kill the yarn a little bit, you know, put a little heat on there to relax it and help it to hold its shape. But I think this is a really fun Tunisian stitch, really easy, and you could incorporate this with a lot of different projects, I think. You could even make like a little bookmark, you know, as a quick little gift for somebody with some cotton, maybe not number 10 thread, but maybe number 3, and it's a little bit thicker, and then, you know, work up, maybe use some stick some purl stitches maybe on the ends and on the bottom so that it helps it to not curl. But this doesn't curl too much. It lays pretty flat. You could even just do it like that. Have a nice little bookmark for somebody. So anyway, let's work these guys off. So we are just going to work these off all in Tunisian Simple. So as a quick refresher, inserting my hook, pulling up a loop, and just pulling through. So basically you're working a slip stitch. So if you know how to do a regular slip stitch in crochet, that's basically what you're doing. Just inserting it in Tunisian and then working the slip stitch. And don't make your slip stitch very tight. You just want to have kind of relaxed, nice even tension. And don't forget to work in your yarn overs. And then I'm just going to insert my hook and knit, Tunisian knit stitch for that last one, and working that guy off, just like that. So yeah, it is curling a little bit, so if you did want to make a bookmark, I would suggest, you know, popping in maybe 2 rows of purl, maybe, you know, 2 purl stitches on each end, and then have your mesh in the middle there. But Here we go. I think this is a really nice, fun, easy Tunisian stitch. So I hope you enjoyed this stitch of the week, and I thank you so much for watching.